76 degrees at 5:04. The current risk remains in effect for coastal Jersey and the Delaware beaches. We're going down to 67.
Kennedy, Following
an update on the church fire in West Philadelphia, there's another one on fire in Parkside at the Greater Rockaway Temple, where alerting the police one person was transported to a hospital. Fire Commissioner Adam Teal says that they might be from an adjacent building. No further details on that person is known. All occupants in the church were evacuated, but the smoke is thick and has spread through the immediate area. Some portions of the building had collapsed internally or onto the street. Teal adds some nearby residences may have to be evacuated. SEPTA says trolley service was being diverted due to the blaze. As you have been hearing in our coverage throughout the day, an Oklahoma judge ruled yesterday that drug maker Johnson & Johnson must pay the state more than $500 million in damages for deceptively marketing painkillers. Many counties in Pennsylvania and the state as a whole are involved in similar lawsuits, and many here saw the decision as good news. Chester County sued 2 pharmaceutical companies this spring. That case has been transferred to federal court in Cleveland, where it will go to trial in October, alongside more than 1,600 other suits from around the country. Chester County Commissioner Michelle Kickline was encouraged by the ruling's implications for pharmaceutical companies.
The decision in Oklahoma clearly shows that they were directly responsible for those victims, and I think that legal analogy certainly is transferable to the rest of the country.
Yes, especially for the county to provide treatment and other services related to the opioid epidemic. She takes it as a rule the companies who made and sold the drugs have to help foot the bill. Phillies and Pirates game 2 tonight at the bank. First pitch is at 7:05. Mostly tonight, going down to 57.
And he also said there's one thing that has cheered him up.
Já pude conhecer bem o presidente Jair Bolsonaro em minhas tratativas com o Brasil. Ele está trabalhando duro.
That's Bolsonaro reading out a tweet from President Trump. Trump says how hard Bolsonaro is working to combat the fires and what a great job he's doing generally, and that he has the full support of the US. So Bolsonaro is using this to prove that maybe he's incurred the wrath of Europe, but he still has support from the Trump administration.
Putting aside this whole issue of diplomacy, these feuds, what about these fires themselves? I mean, what kind of progress is being made?
Well, Bolsonaro's made about 40,000 troops available. The Brazilian defense ministry is saying that the number of regions that are hit by fire is down, and that they're not just putting out fire, but they're also going after people setting these fires. Bolsonaro has said that his government has zero tolerance for criminal activity, and let's not forget that environmentalists say that most of these fires have been set by farmers and by cattle ranchers who are exploiting the fact that Bolsonaro has loosened environmental regulations and using that as an opportunity to grab land.
That's NPR's Philip Reeves in Rio de Janeiro. Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome.
Geologist Dan Nepstad has studied the Amazon for more than 30 years. He explained to me why it's hard to know the true extent of these fires.
In an intact Amazon forest, a virgin forest, if it's a really dry year and the fire gets going, it's shin high. You can step over it. And that means it doesn't register a lot of heat, and the satellites don't pick up that as an active fire. The best way to know if the forest is burning is smoke coming up the top. So it's really hard to know how much of the virgin forest of the Amazon are catching fire. If they're open fires or fires burning damaged forests, they're much easier to spot, and that's most of what we're seeing this year.
Talk more about what we've seen this year. How is it different from the fires in the past?
Well, it's a big fire year. It's the biggest one in the last decade. A lot of the fires burning now are persistent, and that means that those are felled forests, giant rainforest trees that have been cut down with chainsaws, allowed to dry, and now they're being burned in preparation for crops or pasture or whatever. A lot of smoke because there's so much tree biomass, a lot of energy, meaning that smoke goes really high into the atmosphere and it can spread across entire regions.
You've written that the biggest threat to the Amazon is the large-scale displacement of scrub vegetation. What is that, and what does that mean in terms of the Amazon being exposed to more and more fires?
So what was deep, dense shade that kept the litter layer, the fuel layer, moist and difficult to burn is drying out, and there's a lot more of it. The next fire is much more intense. It kills more trees, and pretty soon grasses and shrubs start to move into what was a pristine forest. And that's what I call this scrub vegetation, so that eventually you really can't recognize that that's a forest that was never saw a chainsaw, but it's completely altered. That for me is the most worrisome long-term scenario for the Amazon.
What then is the solution? What steps can the Brazilian government take to protect the Amazon?
You know, I think there's a huge opportunity to solve this, and not just with dumping water or putting out fires, but to really come up with a systemic strategy that is long-term. We really need to shift from fire-prone systems like extensive cattle to more intensive forms that are tree-based, so that the landholder will be more reluctant to use fire to manage their land, and they'll invest more in fire prevention.
Before I let you go, I've heard over and over the last few days this idea that the Amazon is the lungs of the world. Is that a good way to think of it?
That's a little misleading. There's a lot of big old trees, and they respire a lot, just like people have to breathe in oxygen. Those tree trunks also have to breathe in oxygen, and all of that dead wood, as it rots, is taking up oxygen. Much better to focus on the Amazon as a cooling system for the planet. You know, really, every time a little droplet of water leaves a leaf and goes into vapor, it's absorbing energy and it's cooling things down. And the Amazon is so big that if we lose it, it's going to change the way air and energy move around the planet, and that means our climate will change. For me, that's something that really ties us to the health of the Amazon wherever we are on the planet.
That's Dan Nepstad. He's president and founder of the Earth Innovation Institute. Thank you for explaining this to us.
My pleasure. Great talking to you.
Jeffrey Epstein's accusers told their stories in court today. Despite the wealthy financier's death in prison earlier this month, the federal judge on the case made an unusual move to allow Epstein's alleged victims to speak anyway. More than a dozen women came forward to describe what they called his extensive sex trafficking ring, an operation that targeted young girls in particular. At a news conference afterwards, one accuser called it a bit of power and strength. NPR's Colin Dwyer is here to tell us more. Hey there, Colin.
Hi, Audie.
Can you describe the scene at the courthouse?
Well, it was a bit of a chaotic scene outside. Members of the media couldn't bring recording equipment into the courtroom, but that didn't stop them from turning out en masse to cover the story. Inside the courtroom, it was teeming with accusers. Now, not all of them spoke, but all told, they filled more than 3 rows of seating in the courtroom. Judge Berman set the tone from the very beginning. He said that the hearing was intended to promote transparency, and that victims should be included before and not after the fact. Now, as you mentioned, that decision was pretty unusual. Gloria Allred, who was an attorney for some of the victims, said that she'd seen nothing like it in all of her years in legal practice. She also said that often judges are distracted during victim statements, but
that did not occur this morning. I was watching this judge. He listened carefully. He looked at the victims who were testifying and or their attorneys who were testifying on behalf of their clients. He was showing respect.
I want to hear a little more about this and the themes that emerged.
Well, their stories varied, obviously, but the similarities were striking. Many of them depicted their childhoods having been stolen. They also spoke of their futures being stolen because of the enduring trauma related to these experiences. They also described Epstein as a deft manipulator. They said that he wielded his power and influence to intimidate them, and he often worked pretty smoothly. One woman said that he was so strategic in his manipulation that it was almost like being a frog that was being boiled in a pot of water without realizing it. A pretty stirring metaphor. And in general, there's just a lot of different that was just a whole new trauma for them. And that while this day was nice to be able to speak their stories, they are deeply disappointed that they won't get to face them in court.
So let's talk more about that, because this is complicated. What comes next for the victims here and for the prosecutors?
So both prosecutors and defense attorneys have asked for these charges to be dropped. The judge didn't issue a decision today, but as you can imagine, that this is likely the end of that criminal case. But this isn't the only case that involves Epstein at this point. Several women have also come forward suing his estate, accusing him of crimes against them. And also the authorities themselves have said that they aren't done either. One of the themes of this hearing today, at least from the authorities' side, was that they plan to pursue his co-conspirator. They plan to pursue his alleged co-conspirators wherever they may be.
That's NPR's Colin Dwyer. He spoke to us from New York. Colin, thank you.
Thank you, Audie.
President Trump wants Russia back in the G7, but other members say Russia hasn't earned its return to the group, and several senators agree.